And joining me now to continue the important conversation on affirmative action is Elie Mystal, justice correspondent at The Nation, host of the new podcast, Contempt of Court, and author of Allow Me to Retort, a Black Guy's Guide to the Constitution. Elie, my friend, in response to Chief Justice John Roberts' majority opinion, you wrote in The Nation, quote, his opinion attempts to capture the 14th Amendment and redeploy it to justify a white version of colorblindness that just so happens to lock in a status quo that benefits whites. Why is the majority's invocation of the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause such an insult here?
Yeah, because the 14th Amendment passed after the Civil War, after we fought a whole war to try to end slavery in this country, was not passed so varsity blues white kids could get into college. That wasn't the point of the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment was passed explicitly to redress racial strife in the past. In fact, the authors of the 14th Amendment, and legal nerds will note that I am making an originalist argument right now. The authors of the 14th Amendment passed the 14th Amendment specifically so they could do things like pass the 1866 Civil Rights Act, the Ku Klux Klan Act, as it was known. They weren't sure they had constitutional authorization to pass Civil Rights Act, which included policies like affirmative action during Reconstruction. They weren't sure they had the constitutional authority to pass those acts without ratification of the 14th Amendment. So the idea that the 14th Amendment can now be weaponized against the very people it was designed to help is an anathema to me, and one of the many problems with John Roberts' majority opinion.
But Elie, Justice Roberts also writes, quote, nothing in this opinion should be construed as prohibiting universities from considering an applicant's discussion of how race affected his or her life, be it through discrimination, inspiration, or otherwise. But let's speak frankly, as we always do. Doesn't this still allow for race to be a factor in the admissions process?
Well, see, here's the thing. Roberts is saying that you can still consider diversity, but he's also taking away the tools that universities use to consider diversity. And that's not just saying that. That is the opinion of multiple people who work at universities where affirmative action has already been taken away, right? In states that have already banned affirmative action, like California and Michigan. University officials submitted briefs to the court saying, this is what we need, that we've tried to do it without affirmative action and doesn't work the same way. So Roberts is essentially saying, yeah, you can still drink. I'm just going to take away all the water. Good luck. Like it's a part of the insult of his decision. He's trying to do it for press, basically. But on the ground, he's taken away the practical tool. I just also want to say one thing, Katie. The idea that now, as a Black student, you've got to waste time in your word-limited college essay explaining to admissions counselors how racism works in the country, because John Roberts says that's now just part of your job, is, again, insulting. Black kids across the country got other things they want to talk about in their college essays other than explaining to admissions counselors how racism worked in their life.
Elie, we got to talk about Ed Bloom, who helped bring this lawsuit by Students for Fair Admissions. And he's a white guy, for people who didn't know this. Why is it so important for Ed Bloom to get a group of AAPI students to serve as the plaintiffs in these two lawsuits?
Because when you let white supremacists co-opt your argument, you lose. Look, I have written that I think Harvard discriminates in certain ways against the AAPI community. If you just look at the facts of the case, and one of the ways that we saw was that Harvard uses something called a personal rating, which is like a amalgam of guidance counselors and teacher recommendations letters. And AAPI students score lower on that personal rating for some reason, probably a racist reason, right? But the Supreme Court didn't take away the personal rating. Harvard can still use the personal rating, which was factually shown to discriminate against AAPI students. Another way that they're discriminated against, colleges do geographical sorting, right? Mm-hmm. Like they want 18 kids from San Francisco and 5 kids from Iowa. Well, that might sound fair, but if you're an AAPI student, you're most likely living in San Francisco, right? AAPI kids are clustered on the coasts of this country. When you have 18 kids slots from San Francisco, you're putting a lot of Asian Americans fighting with each other for like 2 nuts, right? You go out to Iowa, that's going to disproportionately favor white kids. You put in 5 kids from Montana, that's going to disproportionately favor white kids. But the Supreme Court didn't ban geographic sorting in college admissions, did it? No. They only banned race consciousness in college admissions, the one thing that the trial court, the finder of fact in our legal institutions, said was not hurting AAPI students. And that's the problem with letting white people like Ed Blum take over your arguments. You'll lose. The thing that actually you could have won, you lost, and instead you ended up with a decision that's only going to help the mediocre white kids that Ed Blum's been trying to help his entire career.
Yeah, and you're also doing the model minority wedge of using the AAPI community to try to divide and conquer the minority groups that exist in our community of colors. Elie Ying, Mystal, thank you so much for your insight. As always, we'll have you back ASAP to be able to talk a little bit more.